Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Saya ucapkan kepada Yang Berusaha Profesor Madya Dr. Norrizah Jaafar Sidek, Yang Berusaha Dr. Khanizah Hasliza Abdul Khalil dan Barisan Pensyarah Biologi. Saya Puan Maisa Muhammad sebagai moderator anda untuk sesi syarahan biologi yang disiarkan secara langsung di YouTube Pusat Asasi. Sebelum saya memperkenalkan siapakah pensyarah jemputan pada kali ini, kita mulakan dengan bacaan doa. Dengan ini, saya menjemput saudara Muhammad Zaki Nawari bin Syahrul dari kumpulan S05. Silakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Al-Fatihah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah lana sudurana wa yassir lana umurana wahlul 'uqdatam min alsinatina yafqahu aqwalana. Allahumma yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin.
Terima kasih Muhammad Zaki Nawari. Untuk pengetahuan para pelajar, sesi program ini adalah untuk memberi peluang kepada anda semua untuk mendapat pengalaman menghadiri syarahan yang akan dijalankan oleh pensyarah-pensyarah daripada fakulti. Semoga pendedahan ini akan dapat dimanfaatkan oleh semua. Dan syarahan profesor pada hari ini adalah yang terakhir untuk sesi 2021-2022. Dengan ini saya memperkenalkan Profesor Madya Dr. Norrizah Jaafar Sidek. Sebenarnya beliau tidak asing lagi dengan kita semua kerana telah menyampaikan chapter 3 untuk kod Bio 091 pada semester yang lepas. Tetapi saya akan memperkenalkan juga beliau untuk pelajar yang baru sahaja menyertai live di YouTube Pusat Asasi. Beliau sekarang bertugas di Pusat Pengajian Biologi, Fakulti Sains Gunaan UiTM Shah Alam. Beliau adalah pemegang ijazah dan sarjana daripada Universiti Malaya dan dianugerahkan Dr. Falsafah dalam bidang Plant Bioteknologi dari Universiti Putra Malaysia. Beliau mempunyai pengalaman mengajar dalam bidang Research Methodology, Plant Bioteknologi, Biosafety and Biosecurity, Contemporary Biology, Biodiversity dan Animal Physiology. Selain itu, beliau turut menyelia pelajar pasca siswazah tempatan dan antarabangsa. Beliau adalah pakar dalam bidang Plant Bioteknologi. Profesor Madya Dr. Norrizah Jaafar Sidek juga adalah ahli dalam Excellent Entity Agriculture Biotechnology Research Group UiTM, International Society of Horticulture Science, Natural Product Society dan Malaysia Society of Plant Physiology. Dengan ini, saya menjemput Profesor Madya Dr. Norrizah Jaafar Sidek untuk menyampaikan syarahan untuk bab yang terakhir untuk kod Bio 095, Chapter Respiration. Sebelum terlupa, jika ada sebarang pertanyaan daripada para pelajar, anda boleh menulis di ruangan chat sama ada di Google Meet atau di YouTube. Silakan Dr. Norrizah.
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Thank you Puan Malisa Muhammad. Right, so today I'll give a lecture on the respiratory system. So I will share the slides now. Right, so I will continue with the respiratory systems, right? So actually in this lecture, I will focus on the human respiratory systems. But I'll just give some brief explanation of the various respiratory surfaces in animals. We have covered this topic before, right? So then we'll continue with the human respiratory system. So the learning outcomes for this lecture is identify and describe the structures and functions of human respiratory system, state the fixed law of diffusion and Dalton's law of partial pressure, explain the process of gas exchange and gas transport, describe the oxygen dissociation, curve of hemoglobin, discuss the control of breathing by chemoreceptors and discuss the effect of smoking. Right? So we look at various respiratory system. Okay, so there are many respiratory surfaces, such as the outer surface, skin, gills, the trachea, and the lungs. Yeah? So different types of animals here, you can see here, they have different kinds of the respiratory system. Okay, so if you look at the worms here, right? So the worms, it is a very small size and flat shape. Okay, it uses skin as a gas exchange organ. Then we look at the.
Sorry, apa gagu? Slide Doctor, dia tak move to the worm slide worm punya. Sekarang dia di slide number 1.
Oh, ya ke? Saya dah move from one to another one.
Sekarang masih lagi di okay now. Let's move.
Okay, it's moving now,
Okay.
Right. So I will start again. Starts from. Is it moving now? So I'm not using the PowerPoint slides. PowerPoint. I just used the menu one. Is it okay? Can you see, Melissa?
Yes, clear, Doctor.
All right. Okay, so I'll continue with the next slide. Is on the worms. The worms, it use the skin as a gas exchange organ. Next is the fish. The fish here, they use the gills as the respiratory organ. And then the cista here can also use the gills. And next is the here is the fish, still in the fish, right? And then you can see here the insects. So the insects, they have a very extensive system of the external chitin. They have the trachea. Okay, and then the air enters the trachea through the spiracles. Okay, so you can see here the spiracles. Oxygen and carbon dioxide will flow in and out through these spiracles until it reach at the tracheal tube and the tracheal. And then we can see here, the terrestrial vertebrate, they have lungs. They use lungs for the respiratory respiratory system. Okay, and then the frogs, they have this cutaneous respiration. The exchange of gases through the moist skin. Right, and then this one is the birds. You can see here. Okay, the birds, they have this parabronchi, right, and then the anterior and the posterior air sacs. Okay, these are just for a revision. Different respiratory surface. Okay, so today I will move to the structures and functions of human respiratory system. Okay, so as we know that we are alive because we are breathing, right? So we take in oxygen in and out. We take in oxygen in and release the carbon dioxide out. Okay, so we are alive because we are breathing, right? So the mammals, they use negative pressure breathing, pulling air into their lungs. So the negative pressure breathing means that it is lower. Okay, the pressure is lower inside than the atmosphere. Atmosphere. Okay, the pressure is created in the lungs. It's created the lungs. So if you look at the Boyle's law, according to the Boyle's law, okay, it relates the pressure and the volume of a gas. Okay, so the volume and the pressure are inversely proportional, right? So when the volume of the gas is increased, the pressure is decreased, and vice versa, right? So if you look at this model, this is the balloon model. Okay, you can see here when the pressure, right? So if you look here, before we go to the mechanism here, we look at the structure here. The white tube, this one, it acts as a trachea and bronchi. Bronchi, whereas the bell jar here is it is a chest cavity, and the lung is the balloon itself. Okay, so and the sheath here is act as a diaphragm. So when we pull the diaphragm downwards here, the volume will increase, the pressure will be decreased, and the air will be flow from outside of the bell jar into this part here, right? So this is during the inspirations. So it is inhaling air, whereas during expiration or exhaling air, okay, when we look at we just make the diaphragm go back to the normal place here, right? So the pressure will increase, and if we look at the volume, it will decrease, right? And you can see the pressure, the balloon here, the volume is decreased because of the pressure is increased, and the size of the balloon is smaller before this, right? So this is what we call as expiration, where the air is flowing outside from the bell jar. So the respirations is the process of gas exchange between the organism, between human and its environment. So oxygen from the environment is taken up during respiration, and then it will be delivered to the tissues or the individual cells. Okay, at the same time, carbon dioxide also will be generated during cellular respiration, and then it will be excreted into the environment. And there is a series of the respiratory system of human. It not only consists of the lungs, but it also it is a series of tubes. Tubes. Okay, so if you look here, these are the diagram which shows where the air will enter the body through the nostril here. Okay, and then you can see here it will flow to the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity, and then the air will pass and will be filtered. Will be filtered, and then moistened and brought to the body temperature. So the nasal cavity here, it is moist. You have a mucus, the mucus, and it is lined with the cilia. Cilia, that the ciliated epithelium. There's also a ciliated epithelium there, which is rich in the blood vessels. So what's the importance of this mucus within the epithelium? Is it is the function is to trap inhaled dirt, bacteria and other foreign particles. right? And then here, if you can see here, okay, at the back of the nasal cavities, you can see the pharynx, yeah? Pharynx and also the epiglottis and the larynx, okay? So what's the difference between this pharynx and larynx? You can see here, the larynx here. Okay, the pharynx, it is part of both the respiratory and digestive system. Okay, but larynx here is a part of only for the respiratory system. Okay, and it is a muscular organ that forms an air passage for the lungs and vocal cord. Vocal cord, and it is made of the cartilage, right? Okay, so from the larynx, air will be passed into the windpipe, or what we call it as trachea, the trachea. Okay, so you can see here the windpipe or the trachea. Okay, so here is the larynx, the trachea. It is covered with, it has many cartilage, yeah, the cartilage here. Okay, and then it will split into two, okay, the right bronchus and the left bronchus and the bronchioles, yeah. So it will reach at the left lung and the right lung, yeah. So the importance of cartilage, yeah, at the tracheal here is it reinforces the walls of both the larynx and the trachea, where it keep this part of airway open, right? So here is a sectional view of the trachea. You can see here the esophagus, yeah, the posterior wall of the trachea, lacking of the tracheal cartilage, this part, and there is a mucosa, yeah, the thyroid gland, and the tracheal cartilage, yeah, the cartilage. Yeah. So the cartilage is very important, yeah, to keep the airway open. Okay, now we look at the two branches, the bronchi here, yeah, where it connects to the lung. Yeah, so we have this right lung and the left lung. Yeah? So the lung here, there are right lung here. It has these three lobes. Yeah? 1, 2, 3. Whereas the left lung, it has only 2 lobes. 1, 2. Yeah? And at the end here, you can see the bronchioles, and then the pleural fluid, and the diaphragm. Yeah? The diaphragm. Okay, so there is a small air sacs here, the alveoli. Okay, so the lungs are large. Yeah? Paired, yeah. 1, 2. And spongy organs occupy the thoracic chest, the thoracic cavities. These are the thoracic cavity, right? And the pleural membranes, yeah, forms a continuous sac that encloses the lung. Yeah? So it's lining the thoracic cavity. Okay, and the space between the pleural membrane is the pleural cavity, where it contains the liquid to provide lubrication between lungs and the chest wall. Okay? And there are many millions of tiny bronchioles. Okay? Okay, and the end of the bronchioles is the air sacs. Yeah. it is lined by extremely thin single layer of the epithelium. Okay, so gases will diffuse freely to the walls of the alveolus and into the capillary. Okay, so the capillaries surrounds the alveolus, the walls of the alveolus. Okay. All right. Now we look at the muscular floor of the thoracic cavity. What we call it as diaphragm. Yeah, the diaphragm. These are the diaphragm, right? And the inner pleural membrane cavity is called as visceral. Okay, there's this inner pleural membrane, and we call it visceral pleural, and the outer one is what we call is as parietal pleural membrane, right? And between these two membrane, we call it as pleural cavity, the pleural cavity. Okay, right. So this is the cross sections of the alveoli. You can see here the pulmonary artery. This is the oxygen poor blood, whereas the oxygen-rich blood is the veins. The veins, you can see here. Yeah. Right. Now we look at the last surface, the dense capillary bed envelope alveoli through the scanning electron microscope. Okay. So this alveoli, it has a large surface area. It provides for the gas exchange, and they are moist so that the gas can dissolve easily before the diffusion take place. Okay, and the cell wall is only one thick cell wall, very thin walls, so that the importance of having thin wall is so that the gas can dissolve and diffuse easily, and surrounded by numerous blood capillaries. Okay, now we look at the Fick's law of diffusion. If you look at the Fick's law of diffusion, it is a process in respiration, okay, which is passive. It's not active. It is a passive. So these are driven by difference in oxygen and carbon dioxide concentrations on both sides of the membrane. Okay, so in general, the rate of diffusion between two regions is governed by the Fick's law of diffusions. So when these gases diffuse across the membrane of the alveolus, it depends on the difference in the partial pressure on two sides of the membranes. All right, so if you look at this picture, okay, first we look at the alveoli, the alveoli, where the concentration of oxygen is greater than in the pulmonary capillaries, so will diffuse in the pulmonary capillary, right? It will diffuse in the pulmonary capillaries. So oxygen will diffuse from the alveoli into the blood. Whereas carbon dioxide here, the carbon dioxide, is more concentrated in the blood than in the alveoli. So it will diffuse out into the alveoli. So this is in the lung. Alveoli in the alveoli. Yeah? Whereas in the tissues, yeah, the oxygen is more concentrated in the blood, right, than in the body cells. So it will diffuse out of the capillaries into the cells. Yes, these are the tissues, right? The tissues, cells in the tissues. So it diffuse out, diffuse out to the cells. Yeah? The carbon dioxide is more concentrated in the cells, so it will diffuse out of the cell and move into the blood. Yeah. So these are it follows the fixed law of diffusion. Yeah. You can see here in the cells, in the tissue, the partial pressure, yeah, oxygen in the tissue is 40 millimeter of mercury. Yeah, it's only 40, but the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide is 46 millimeter of mercury. Yeah, so it's different from in the alveoli. Yeah, at the lung. All right. So these are the rate of diffusions. The formula you can see here. R is the rate of diffusions, is equal to the diffusion of the diffusion constants. Yeah. So the rate of diffusion is the amount of oxygen or carbon dioxide diffusing per unit of time. Yeah. And A is the area over which the diffusion takes place. And here the difference in concentrations, yeah, between the interior of the organism or the humans and the external environment. And D here, it represents the distance across which diffusion takes place. Okay. So what are the factors that increase the rate of diffusions? Yeah. So one is the surface area. Okay. Number two is the diffusion distance, right? And the difference in the partial pressure. Yeah. And the gas will diffuse faster if the difference in pressure or the surface area is increased. Okay. Okay. Another law of law is what we call as Dalton's law of partial pressure. Okay. So if you look at this Dalton's law, okay, it refers to the partial pressure, law of partial pressure. In a mixture of gases, the total pressure of the mixture is the sum of the pressure of the individual gases. Okay. So if you look here, each gas, okay, independent of the others, a partial pressure, the same pressure would exert if it were present alone. Okay. So if you look at this one, yeah, the combination of gases will give the total pressure of the mixture and the sum of the pressures of the individual gases. Okay, so the partial pressure here, if you look at different gases, yeah, the nitrogen gas, the fractional composition of the dry air is about 78.09%, oxygen 20.95%, argon 0.93%, and other inert gases is carbon dioxide 0.03%. 0.03, so it gives us 100%, right? So if you look here, right, the total atmospheric pressure of sea level is about 760 millimeter mercury. Okay, and each type of gas contributes to the total atmospheric pressure according to the fraction of the total molecule present, and these fractions contribute by gas is called as partial pressure. Okay, so if you look at this partial pressure of each of these fraction composition of the dry air, the nitrogen, oxygen, the carbon dioxide, and the partial pressure, okay, is 760. Okay, the atmospheric pressure of air is 760 millimeter of mercury times to the percentage of the fraction composition of the dry air here. Okay, so for the partial pressure of nitrogen, we have 593.5 millimeter of mercury. Yes. Oxygen partial pressure is 159.2, and then the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide is only 0.2 millimeter of mercury. Okay. So each of these gas, it will flows or move from the higher pressure to lower pressures. Okay. Right. All right. Now we look at this diagram. Okay. You can see here the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveolus. And the alveolus is about 105. Yeah. This is the inhaled air, and this is the exhaled air. Okay. The partial pressure of oxygen in the alveolus here is lesser than the partial pressure at the atmosphere. Yeah. It's only 159. Yeah. So the blood that leaves the alveoli has a lower partial pressure that is which is about here is about 100 millimeter of mercury. Yeah, millimeter. As the blood passes through capillaries in the rest of the body, oxygen leaves the blood and diffuse into the tissues. Okay, and what can see here, yeah, the tissues have a lower partial pressure, which is about only 40 millimeter of mercury. Right. Right. And then this is about the partial pressure. Yeah, the partial pressure of where we can look when we can see it in humans. Yeah. So these are the inhaled air alveolar spaces, yeah, the alveolar capillaries, the pulmonary veins, and the systemic arteries. Okay, and then these are the systemic capillaries. Yeah? The oxygen will be flows from this part into the body tissues. Okay, whereas the carbon dioxide will flows from out from the body tissues to the pulmonary arteries and systemic veins, right? And then it will pump out right, to the black entry alveolus capillaries, and then the carbon dioxide will be flows out. This is during the exhalations. All right. So now we look at what happens. What happens at higher altitudes? At higher altitudes, the oxygen is about 20.95%. Okay, but the atmospheric pressure is only about 380 millimeter mercury. So if we look at the partial pressure of the oxygen at the higher altitude, for example, at the top of 3,000 meter mountain, for example, it's about only 80 millimeter of mercury, right? So this reduce in partial pressure of oxygen prevent the oxygen from entering the lungs. All right, so the atmospheric air pressure, it will decrease with altitude. So from 760 millimeter mercury at sea level is about only 80 millimercury of mercury at the top of, for example, like 5,000 meter mountains. All right, so here there is a lower air pressure. Air pressure reducing partial pressure. So the lower air pressure means that the cell oxygen proportion will result in a lower pressure of oxygen in the lungs. Okay, so here this is because the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveolus is higher. Okay, so it's about 105 millimercury, millimeter of mercury, right? Okay, so you can see here, the partial pressure are based on the percentage of the gas in dry air. At sea level of this is atmosphere one atmosphere or 760 milligram, 60 milligram millimeter of mercury. So just now is about 760, 78. Okay, so you can see here the difference at the sea level and also at the on top of the mountain, about 6,000 meter. The atmospheric pressure is about 380. So the oxygen is millimeter of mercury here. So the oxygen is at the sea level is 159. Whereas at the mountain, top of the mountain is about 80 meter of mercury. So at higher altitudes, there is less pressure, right? So it has less air gets into the lungs. Okay. All right. So this is the process of gas exchange and gas transport. Yeah, in the alveolus. Okay, you can see here. It shows the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, right? Before we go to the mechanism, we look at the figures here. Yeah, here is from the pulmonary artery, yeah, and then the capillary here, right? And then you can see here to the pulmonary veins, yeah, to the pulmonary veins, yeah. So you can see here there is a film of moisture, right? The film of moisture, and the carbon dioxide, it can escape into the alveolus. Yeah? Oxygen can enter the red blood cells. Yes, these are the capillaries, and there is a diffusion of oxygen occurs here. Yeah, the diffusion of carbon dioxide also can occur at this site, right? So oxygen is inhaled air dissolved in a film of moisture, right, on the epithelial cell, and then it will diffuse across the epithelium into the blood capillaries. Yeah? Whereas the carbon dioxide diffuse in the opposite way from the blood capillaries. Yeah? These are the blood capillaries across the epithelium of the alveolus, and here is the epithelium, into the air space of the alveolus and out of the body as exhale air. Yeah. So it shows the gas exchange, yeah, at the alveolus. All right. And the alveoli are separated by two cell layers. Yeah? And the distance is very, very short. Yeah? Very, very, very short distance between the air and the blood, where it is only 0.5 to 5.5 micron. Yeah, micron meter. Yeah? And the important is that it allows rapid diffusion of the gases. Yeah. So remember the Fick's laws. Yeah. Okay, decreasing the distance. Yeah. It will allows rapid diffusion of the gases. Okay. So if you look here, yeah, here is the red blood cell, yeah, the capillary. So these are the alveolus. So the oxygen will move into the capillaries, okay, and then the carbon dioxide, it will move from the red blood cells, the capillary, into the alveolus. Yeah, it's very, very thin. Yeah, there are only the distance between the air of the alveolus and the blood is only very short distance. Okay, so if you look back the formula, yeah, the formula here, yeah, the distance. Yeah. The distance here Okay, the rate of diffusion will be increased if the distance is very short. Okay, so we can see also here in the diagram the nucleus of type 1, the squamous epithelium cell. Yeah. And then we can see also here the alveoli, and then the alveolar pores, right? The red blood cells surrounds the alveoli, right? And then the epithelial cell nucleus, endothelial cell nucleus, and the capillary. Okay. So gas exchange between alveoli and blood capillaries. Each alveolus serves as a tiny depot from which oxygen is loaded into the blood by capillaries. Yeah. So the gas exchange can see here. Yeah. The carbon dioxide, the oxygen go to the oxygen here. Okay. Will flows from the alveoli into the blood. Yeah. So this is the gas exchange in the lungs. Yeah. So the concentrations of the oxygen is more concentrated, yeah, in the alveoli than in the pulmonary capillaries. So the oxygen will diffuse from higher concentrations, yeah, to lower concentrations. Yeah, it will diffuse from the alveoli into the blood. Whereas the carbon dioxide, yeah, is more concentrated in the blood than in the alveoli. Yeah? So the carbon dioxide will move from higher concentration into lower concentration. It will move out of the capillaries here into the alveoli. Okay, so these are the gas exchange occurs in the lungs. Okay. Okay, so I think I stop here first, right? And then we will continue with the lectures on gas exchange in the tissues.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Okay, so guys, kita break around 10 minutes. So kita akan kembali semula dalam pukul 11. Okay. Jika pelajar ada beberapa soalan, boleh type di ruangan chat di Google Meet dan juga di YouTube. Okay. Terima kasih.
Okay, sama-sama.
Okay guys, I want to share something before we continue with lecture with Professor Madya and Norrizah. Okay, atmospheric pressure on the top of mountain of Everest is around 200 millimeter of mercury. So that's why most of the hikers have difficulties in breathing on the top of Everest. Okay, seterusnya saya persilakan Profesor Madya dan Norrizah Jaafar Sidek untuk meneruskan lecture chapter 8. Silakan Doktor.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and thank you Pemalisa Muhammad. Okay, so I will continue with the lectures. So now I will share the slides, PowerPoint. Right, so we are still in the topics on gas exchange. Gas exchange in the alveoli and also the blood capillaries. Right, so just now we have covered the gas exchange in the lungs. Right, so you can see here, right, where the alveoli, the oxygen will flows out from the alveoli to the blood, and then the carbon dioxide will flows out from the blood from the capillaries, from the capillaries into the alveoli because of the different concentrations of both gases in the lungs. Now we look at the gas exchange in the tissues, right? So here, okay, the oxygen is more concentrated in the blood than in the body cells, so it will diffuse out of the capillaries into the cells. So whereas the carbon dioxide is more concentrated in the cells, so it will diffuse out of the cell and move into the blood, right? Okay, now we look at the gas transport of oxygen, where the gas is where the oxygen will be transported by the hemoglobin. So the hemoglobin, it is a type of protein where it composed of 4 polypeptide chains, and 4 organic compounds, what we call it as heme, heme group. And each heme group, it has an atom of iron. Okay, so this iron, it can bind with the molecule of oxygen, right? So the oxygen loaded in the lungs, and it also can be unloaded in the tissues. Okay? Right. So if you look at the lungs here, there is a difference in the partial pressure between the alveolus and the blood capillaries. Okay, so here the hemoglobin will be loaded up. Hemoglobin in the blood load up with the oxygen. So here it will form the oxyhemoglobin, right? Can see here the difference of the partial pressure, right? From the top, number 1 here, the partial pressure of the oxygen is 160. And then here, at the lungs here, is about 104. 104. There's a difference in the partial pressure, alveolus, and also in the capillaries. And then if you look at the body tissues down here, right? Here is where the oxygen is unloaded, meaning that the oxyhemoglobin will release the oxygen. Okay, so it will forming the deoxygen or deoxyhemoglobin. Okay, you can read further in Campbell book, 10 editions at page 121. Okay. All right. Now we look at the loading and unloading of respiratory gases. Okay. Where you can see here the oxygen here, right? The alveolus, the partial pressure of the oxygen is in the alveolus is 100 millimeter of mercury. Okay. And then here at the capillaries, at the circulatory system here, the capillaries is about 100. This is 100. Whereas if you look at the body tissues, the partial pressure of the oxygen is lower than 40 millimeter of mercury. Okay, so it will diffuse into the body tissues, right? So, and then the partial pressure will become lower, 40-40, and then you loaded the oxygen, yeah, because of the difference of the partial pressure. Okay. Whereas for carbon dioxide, you can see here the alveolus. Okay. In the alveolus, 40 will diffuse into the respiratory system, to the capillaries, and the partial pressure is lower here if compared to the body tissues, where it is more than 46 millimeter of mercury. It will diffuse out from the body tissues into the secretory system, in the capillaries here, right? And then it will diffuse out into the alveolus because of the difference of the partial pressure, right? Okay, if you look at the gas transport of carbon dioxide, okay, it is transported in the bloodstream in 3 forms. Okay, so what are the 3 forms? One is where it dissolves in blood plasma, which is only about 7 to 10%. Okay, so if you look at the figures here, okay, these are the red blood cells, these are the plasma, the tissue capillaries, yeah, the tissue capillary wall, and here is the tissue cells. Yeah, so 7 to 10% will dissolve in the blood plasma. Okay, whereas if you look at the carbon dioxide that bind to the hemoglobin, yeah, to the hemoglobin, it is about 20%, but higher, yeah, higher. So bind to the hemoglobin here, right? HB, yeah, hemoglobin, it will uploads, yeah, the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen here, and then the carbonate, yeah, bicarbonate ion, it will form the bicarbonate ions, about 72%, right? 72%. Okay, so this is at the plasma and at the plasma membrane here. Okay, this is near to the tissue cells, whereas it is near to the lungs. Yeah? You can see here the alveoli at the lungs here. Okay, right. Now we look at the 7% of the carbon dioxide dissolved in blood plasma, while the remaining will diffuse into the red blood cell. Okay, the red blood cell, 20% of the carbon dioxide will bind to the amino ends of the hemoglobin, where it will form the carbaminohemoglobin, HB. Yeah, we will combine with the hemoglobin polypeptide chain, forming the carbaminohemoglobin. Okay, and most of the carbon dioxide, it will react with the water. Yeah, it will react with the water, and it will form the carbonic acid. Okay, so if you look here, there is enzyme here involved, which is the carbonic anhydrase. Yeah, so carbon dioxide, it will react with the water, the presence of carbonic anhydrase, to form the carbonic acid, right? And it can dissociate, the carbonic acid will dissociate, to form the bicarbonate ion and the hydrogen ion, the protons, hydrogen ion. Okay, if you look at in the red blood cell here, the carbonic acid, right, the carbonic acid H2CO3, it will dissociate into the ion, the bicarbonate, and also the ion of hydrogens here. Okay, and then the hemoglobin will bind with the hydrogen ion, form the what we call as H2 carbonic acid, right? Hemoglobin by most of the hydrogen ion from the H2O3, H2O3, preventing the hydrogen from acidifying the bloods. So most of the bicarbonate diffuse into the plasma, carried in the bloodstream in the lungs. So if you look here, the CO2 combined with the water to form the carbonic acid, and then it can dissociate it into bicarbonate and hydrogen ion, carbon dioxide, carbonic acid, and bicarbonate, HCO3. All right. Okay. In the lungs, the bicarbonate, which are the HCO3, it will diffuse from the plasma. It will diffuse from the plasma into the red blood cells, combining with the hydrogen ion released from the hemoglobin and forming the carbonic acid. And then this carbonic acid is converted back to carbon dioxide and water, right? And the carbon dioxide is also unloaded from the hemoglobin. So this carbon dioxide, it will diffuse into the plasma. Here is the plasma, to the interstitial fluid, right? And then alveolar space in the lung, from which it is expelled during the exhalation, right? So this occurs in the lung, right? Whereas just now it occurs in the tissue cells and the red blood cells. So it's different, Okay. Now we look at the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, where it shows the amount of oxygen that hemoglobin carries at different oxygen pressures. So degree of hemoglobin saturation is determined by the partial pressure of oxygen, which varies in different organs throughout the body. When the values are grabbed, they produce oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. So you can see there is a S-shaped curve here, right? Where it is nearly flat slope at the at high saturation of hemoglobin here. Okay, so in the lungs, the partial pressure of oxygen is approximately 100 millimeter of mercury. At this hemoglobin has a high affinity of oxygen, which is 98 saturation. Okay, whereas in other tissues of other organs, a typical partial pressure of oxygen is about 40 tissue at rest is about 40 millimeter per mercury. So here hemoglobin has a lower affinity for oxygen and release some, but not all is oxygen to the tissues. And the hemoglobin leaves the tissue, it is still 75% saturated. Okay, now we look at this oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. Okay, we see the reactions, the carbon dioxide reactions with the water, where it will form the carbonic acid. So from here, you can see here, it will lowers the pH from 7.4 to 7.2. Yeah. So it will decrease the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. Okay, so this is what we call it as an Bohr shift. There's an effect. So you can see here the curves will move on the right, towards the right here. So when the CO2 react with the water, pH will become 7.2. From pH 7.4 become more acidic, pH will become 7.2. So here, hemoglobin retain less oxygen at lower pH. Okay. So this where carbon dioxide production is greater, hemoglobin will release more oxygen, which can be used to support the cellular respirations. Yeah. So it retains less oxygen but higher carbon dioxide concentrations. Yeah. Okay. So this graph shows the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin. Yeah, at pH 7.2 and at pH 7.4. 7.4 and 7.2. Yes, so if you look at this point, this point, the at pH 7.4, the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin is about 70%, right? Whereas for pH 7.2, okay, the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin is about 60%. 60% at the same partial pressure oxygen of around 38 millimeter of mercury. Right, now we look at this another topic is on control of breathing. Yeah. So breathing is involuntary mechanism. Yeah, involuntary mechanism means that the breathing is control. Yeah, that not under direct or conscious control. Yeah, this is to sustain life. Yeah, and it involves a negative feedback mechanism. So this is to ensure that gas exchange is coordinated with blood circulation with metabolic demand. Yeah. So if you look at these pictures, what regulates breathing? Yeah, the brain, the medulla oblongata, yeah, somewhere here, right? You can see here, these are the parts. Yeah, the control center here is the part where it controls the breathing, regulates the breathing. Yeah. So the neural circuits in the medulla form a pair of breathing control centers or respiratory centers where it establishes the breathing rhythm. Yeah. And there is a specialized chemoreceptors. Yeah, chemoreceptors where they are sensitive to changes of the concentrations of the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen ion concentrations. Okay. If you look here, the control centers, the central of the central chemoreceptors in the medulla, they are sensitive to the hydrogen ion. Ion only, but not the concentrations of the carbon dioxide. Okay. Whereas if you look at the peripheral chemoreceptors, okay, so there are two types of chemoreceptors. One is central chemoreceptors, the other one is peripheral chemoreceptors. The central chemoreceptors are located at the medulla oblongata, whereas the peripheral chemoreceptors are located at the aorta, yeah, and the walls of aorta, and also the walls of the carotid arteries. Yeah, so the peripheral chemoreceptors at the wall of the aorta, we call it as aortic bodies. Yeah. Whereas the walls of the carotid arteries is called as carotid bodies. Yeah, are called as carotid bodies. Okay, where these are stimulated by the higher of the concentrations of the carbon dioxide, yeah, and the hydrogen concentrations, yeah, the changes of the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen ion concentrations. Okay, so these are the parts, yeah, that regulates the breathing, yeah, the breathing mechanisms. Okay, so they have the chemoreceptors, yeah, receive the chemicals, yeah, chemoreceptors. Okay, so now we look at what happened, yeah, during the breathing and the mechanism control of the breathing. When the artery of the carbon dioxide, yeah, partial increase, some of the carbon dioxide will diffuse into the cerebrospinal fluid, right? And the carbon dioxide will react with water and will cause increasing of hydrogen ion, and it will become more acidic because of the decrease in pH, right? So central chemoreceptors, yeah, in the medulla will be stimulated by the presence, yeah, by the increasing of the hydrogen ion. Okay, and then impulses are sent to the respiratory center, and response, as a response, what happened? It will increase the depth and rate of the breathing rates to remove carbon dioxide until the pressure of the pressure of the carbon dioxide is lowered, right? So then the breathing rate will return to normal. Right? So what happened when the pressure of the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen ion concentration increase? Yeah. So here, can see here, these peripheral chemoreceptors. Yeah. Just now is central chemoreceptors. Now, the peripheral chemoreceptors, which are located at the walls of the aorta and the carotid arteries, will be stimulated. Yeah, and then the impulse, yeah, are sent to the respiratory center, and here increase the depth and rate of breathing rates to remove the carbon dioxide, and the pressure of carbon dioxide is lowered, and then the breathing rate will return to normal. Yeah. So here can see the peripheral chemoreceptors will be functioned, yeah, will be stimulated, yeah, be stimulated because there are high pressure of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentrations. Okay, now we look at when the person breathes deeply, yeah, so it will give a negative feedback, yeah, mechanism that prevents the lung from over expanding. Yeah, it's not too, so it prevents lungs from over expanding. Okay, so during inhalation, senses detect stretching of the lung tissue as stimulus. Okay, so this stretching of the lung tissue, it is as a stimulus. Okay, there is a senses that detect the stretching of the lung tissue. Okay, and this stimulus in the form of impulse are sent to the medulla, and the medulla here, the respiratory centers here, inhibiting further inhalations. All right. Okay, so you can see here, when the blood pH is about 77.4, okay, this is the hemostasis, where there is a stimulus, there is a rising level of the carbon dioxide in tissues, lower the blood pH. Okay, so it will detect the medulla will detect drop in the CFS pH. Okay, there is a sensor control here, right? And then there is a response here. Yeah, the rib muscle and diaphragm increase the rate and the depth of the ventilations. Yeah? And the carbon dioxide level will decrease, and the blood pH will be back to blood pH will back to the normal. Yeah? about 7.4. Okay. These are the negative feedback mechanisms. Yeah, mechanisms. All right. Now we look at the effect of smoking to the respiratory system. Okay, where smoking can cause lung cancer. Right. So toxic substance paralyze the cilia lining in the trachea and the bronchi. Yeah. Preventing removal of the inhaled particles. Okay. So you can see here, remember the trachea, the bronchi, they have the cilia. This cilia is very important because it prevents removal of inhaled particles. As smoke is inhaled, right? Toxic substance paralyze the cilia lining in the trachea and bronchi, preventing removal of the inhaled particles. Yeah. And the tobacco cigarette, it consists of microscopic carbon particles. Okay. And it have dozens of cancer-causing substances which can cause the lung cancer. Okay, so those who smoke cigarettes 15 to 30 times more likely to get the lung cancer. Yeah? And additive substance in the tobacco is the nicotine. Yeah? It can quickly reaches the brain and creates a dependency so that smokers become addicted. And there is also a tar. Yeah? Which is a toxic chemical particle left behind by burning tobacco. Okay, so this substance forms a tacky brown or yellow residue. It will paralyze the cilia in the lungs and contributes to lung disease such as emphysema, chronic bronchitis, and lung cancer. Okay. There are also a few examples of cancer-caused substances like cadmium, arsenic, and also aromatic amines. Yeah? Aromatic amines. Okay. Okay, so you can see here in the pictures here, okay, the contents of the cigarette. Yeah, cigarettes. They have the acetic acid. Yeah, the methane, the arsenic, and the carbon monoxide, methanol, right? So they are very, very dangerous, right? Can cause cancer, right? Lung cancer. All right. So the lung cancer is also known as lung carcinoma, okay, where it is characterized by uncontrolled cell growth in tissues of lung. Okay? Uncontrolled cell growth. Okay? So if you look here, these are the healthy cells. Okay? Where the cells divide, cells differentiated and grow in a uniform cells. Okay? Whereas for the cancer cells, it is an uncontrolled cell division. It just divides very rapidly, right? And it can cause damage. These are the damaged cells, okay? And it can cause cancer. Right, and with the chemotherapy drug, it try to cure, yeah, and remain the healthy cells. the chemotherapy. So if you look here, the lung cancer is characterized by uncontrolled cell growth in tissues of the lung. So if cancer grows in the airways, it may obstruct. It will block the airflow. So it's difficult for breathing. The obstruction can lead to accumulation of secretions behind the blockage. And then tumors in the top of the lung may also invade the local part of the sympathetic nervous system, leading to the dropping of the eyelid. Okay, treatment for lung cancer. It can treat through surgery, right? Surgery means that remove of all or as much as possible of the tumor cells of the tumor, right? Whereas chemotherapy is intravenous medicine to kill the cancer cells. Yep. And then the third treatment is by the radiotherapy. Radiotherapy, which involve a high dose of radiations, high dose radiation, where it is designed to kill the cancer. Okay, and then given in the focused and shielded beam designed to only affect the tumor, right? So this is about the treatments of the lung cancer. Yes, so you can see here the lung carcinoma, the lung cancer. Right, so the effect of smoking to the respiratory system, okay, this is the normal cell and the cancer cell, okay, for those who are smoking, okay, can cause cancer. Right, so I think that's all for the lectures today. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Doktor. Okay, juga terima kasih saya ucapkan kepada Profesor Madya, Dr. Norrizah Jaafar Sidek kerana sudi meluangkan masa berkongsi ilmu kepada kami di Pusat Asasi. Kami sangat berbesar hati dan berharap Dr. Norrizah sudi lagi untuk bersama kami untuk sesi semasa yang akan datang. Okay, terima kasih, Doktor.
Okay, terima kasih.
Okay, pada semua pelajar yang berada sesi syarahan secara Google Meet atau melalui YouTube, boleh scan QR code atau klik sahaja link kehadiran yang diberikan. Okey, sekian, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera.
Waalaikumsalam.